her grand story. And abuse comes in so many forms, from physical and verbal to mental abuse. Stephanie's hits came verbally from her ex, and they too leave scars.
On the morning of February 9th, 2007, Tara came home from a work trip tired, happy to see her kids, ready to finally rest. She had no idea that the man waiting for her inside that house had already decided she would never leave again. Tara Lynn Grant was born on the 28th of June, 1972, in Delta County, Michigan. She grew up in a small, quiet town in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the kind of place where everybody knows your name, where kids ride bikes until dark, and neighbors leave their doors unlocked. Her parents, Mary and Gerald DeStromp, raised her with love and encouragement. And from the very beginning, Tara was the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. Even as an infant, she eagerly said hi to everyone she encountered. Her sister Alicia later remembered that Tara's smile, wide, warm, completely genuine, was the first thing people noticed about her. In 4th grade, her teacher came up with a plan to stop her from talking so much in class she would earn a piece of gum at the end of the day if she stayed quiet. Even then, Tara turned it into a life lesson. That was Tara. She could turn anything into something positive. She was always a bright student, immersing herself in activities like basketball, cheerleading, and performing in the school band as a clarinet player. She raised animals for the county fair. She won a state award for 4-H shooting sports. She was not just a good student, she was a complete human being with big energy, big dreams, and a personality that people simply could not forget. After high school, Tara had her heart set on Michigan State University. She knew from the start she wanted to study business. One of her first jobs was at a local shoe store, and with her knack for sales, according to her sister, she could likely sell you the shoes you were already wearing. She eventually made it to MSU, earned her business degree, and then did something remarkable. She built a real career in a competitive world. She joined Washington Group International after graduation, and her strengths and abilities were continually recognized throughout her two-year career. With numerous opportunities and roles of increasing responsibility, her final position being operations manager. She completed the company's prestigious LEAP program, reserved only for employees with the highest potential. She traveled internationally for work, Puerto Rico, across the U.S., wherever the job took her. To the outside world, Tara Grant had everything: a career, a beautiful home in Washington Township, a suburb 30 miles north of Detroit, 2 children she absolutely adored, a daughter named Lindsay and a son named Ian. Before leaving on business trips, she would often leave notes for her children to remind them how loved they were. She was that kind of mother. The kind who made sure her babies knew, even when she wasn't there, that she was thinking of them. She loved art so much so that when Stephen Grant proposed to her, he did it on the steps of the Detroit Institute of Arts. That detail matters. It tells you who Tara was. She was not just a businesswoman. She was someone who believed in beauty, in meaning, in moments that last forever. But inside that picture-perfect life, something was quietly rotting. Tara was beautiful, ambitious, popular, smart, and a perfectionist. Stephen was only of average attractiveness and never quite completed his college studies. He found work in his father's machine shop, while Tara began a highly successful and lucrative career. The two had 2 children, which led to a stay-at-home dad career path for Stephen, while Tara was the breadwinner of the family. The gap between them in ambition, in income, in confidence was growing every year, and Stephen noticed. He felt it. According to her sister Alicia, she witnessed controlling behavior from Stephen, but was naive and afraid to speak up, assuming Tara could handle herself, a mistake she has since called the worst of her life. Nobody knew how dangerous that resentment had become. On February 9th, 2007, Tara flew home from a work assignment in Puerto Rico. She was 34 years old. Her children were waiting. Her whole future was waiting. She walked through her front door, and she never walked out again. Stephen Grant looked like a normal guy. That was the most dangerous thing about him. He was the dad at the school gate, the neighbor who waved good morning, the husband who gave tearful interviews on TV, begging for his wife to come home. Nobody suspected him because he did not look like a monster. He looked like a worried man. And he used that. Every single day. Stephen Christopher Grant was 37 years old in February 2007. He grew up in Macomb County, Michigan, the same suburban area where he and Tara would eventually build their life together. He was not a man with a dramatic criminal past. No long record, no history of violence that made headlines. He was, by most outward appearances, completely ordinary. And that ordinariness hid everything. Stephen never finished college, while Tara pushed herself community college, then Michigan State. Then a 12-year corporate career. Stephen drifted. He worked part-time at his father's tool and die machine shop. It was honest work, but it was not the kind of work that made a man feel powerful. Not when his wife was flying to Puerto Rico for business meetings and climbing the corporate ladder while he stayed home and packed school lunches. He became a stay-at-home father when the children were young. On the surface, that sounds admirable. But according to those who knew the family, Stephen did not embrace that role with grace. He resented it. He resented Tara's success. He resented her confidence. He resented the fact that she was the one holding the family together financially, and that everyone around them knew it. Tara was the breadwinner. Tara was the one with the career, the travel, the identity outside the home. And Stephen, little by little, began to see that as a threat rather than a blessing. The couple also had a young German au pair living in their home. 1. 9-year-old Verena Dierkes, hired to help with childcare, while Tara traveled for work. Investigators would later learn that Stephen had developed an inappropriate interest in Verena. One former au pair told police that Tara had once warned her to be careful around Stephen, and that he had installed a peephole pointing toward the au pair's bedroom. That detail alone tells you the kind of man Stephen Grant really was behind closed doors. As Tara's business trips became more frequent, the tension inside the house grew worse. Stephen felt left behind. He felt humiliated. And rather than confront his own insecurities honestly, he began to turn that anger outward toward Tara. The arguments became more frequent, more intense. Stephen later told investigators that the central fight was always the same: Tara's travel schedule, her long absences, and what he saw as her choosing work over family. But people close to Tara told a different story. She loved her children deeply. She left them notes before every trip. She called home constantly. She was not abandoning her family. She was providing for them. Stephen could not accept that. In the days leading up to February 9th, 2007, Tara had just returned from a work assignment in Puerto Rico. She called Stephen from the airport. By all accounts, it was not a warm call. There was tension. There was something unsaid, hanging in the air between them. She came home that evening. The children were not there. They were staying with relatives that night. The house was quiet, and Stephen Grant had already made up his mind. Whatever happened in that house in the hours that followed, it ended with Tara Lynn Grant dead on the floor, strangled by the hands of the man who had once proposed to her on the steps of an art museum. The man who had stood beside her at an altar. The man who had held their newborn children. That man had become something else entirely. And Tara, alone in her own home, never had a chance. The children were not home that night. That is the detail that stays with you. Lindsay, age 6. Ian, age 4. They were safe with relatives. They had no idea that by morning, their mother would be gone, and their father would be the reason why. February 9th, 2007 was a Friday. Tara had just flown back from Puerto Rico. She was tired from travel. She came home to her house in Washington Township, the house with the 2-car garage, the quiet street, the life she had worked so hard to build. She walked through the door. Stephen was waiting. According to his own confession, the two began arguing almost immediately. The fight was about the same thing it was always about: Tara's work, travel, her absences, the tension that had been building for months inside their marriage. But this night, something was different. This night, Tara reportedly told Stephen she was done. She wanted out of the marriage. She was going to take the children. That was the moment Stephen Grant stopped being a frustrated husband and became something far more dangerous. He strangled her. The Macomb County medical examiner later confirmed that Tara Lynn Grant died of strangulation. According to expert testimony presented at trial, she likely lost consciousness within 90 seconds and was dead within 4 minutes. 4 minutes. That is how long it took for everything Tara had ever dreamed of, worked for, and loved to be silenced forever. She was 34 years old. What Stephen did next is almost impossible to process. He did not call 911. He did not panic and run. He made a calculated decision, one that showed just how cold he truly was. He took Tara's body to his father's tool and die machine shop. And there, in that garage workspace full of metal and machinery, he dismembered her body using a hacksaw. Forensic investigators would later find hair, blood, and tissue evidence throughout the shop. He then scattered most of her remains in Stony Creek Metro Park, a public park near their home, where families walked, dogs and children played. He stored her torso in a plastic container and brought it back to the garage of their family home. Then he went about his life. 5 days passed. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Stephen Grant called the Macomb County Sheriff's Office and reported his wife missing. He told police that on the night of February 9th, Tara had received a phone call and walked out to the end of the driveway, got into a dark car, and simply drove away. He said he had not reported it sooner because she had disappeared before and always came back. Investigators were skeptical from the very beginning. When detectives first arrived at the house, Stephen was nervous, fidgety, and overly cooperative in a way that felt rehearsed rather than genuine. But they had no body. No evidence of a crime scene inside the home. No proof yet. What followed was one of the most disturbing public performances in Michigan criminal history. Stephen Grant started giving media interviews. He appeared on camera, visibly emotional, begging for Tara to come home. Local reporter Hank Winchester later revealed that Stephen was calling him up to 20 times a day, not to share new information, but to ask how he looked on television. He asked whether it would seem strange if he got a haircut, whether it was okay if he went shopping. While Tara's torso sat in a plastic bin in his garage, the community of Washington Township was shaken. Tara's co-workers were devastated. Her friends could not believe she had simply vanished. Hundreds of people followed the case online and on local news, hoping for good news that would never come. Police searched the woods behind the Grant home in late February and found nothing. But then, a woman walking her dog near Stony Creek Metro Park noticed a plastic bag in the snow. Inside, human blood and dog hair that matched the Grant family dog. That bag was enough. On March 2nd, 2007, police arrived at the Grant home with a search warrant. Stephen borrowed a friend's truck and quietly disappeared. Inside the garage, a detective noticed something. A Tupperware container that had not been there during the first walkthrough of the house 2 weeks earlier. He opened it. Tara was inside. The community that had been praying for her safe return now had to face an unbearable truth. The man who had been standing in front of cameras, crying, asking for the public's help, he had known exactly where she was the entire time. The investigation had just become a manhunt. Stephen Grant was gone, but he would not get far. The moment police found Tara's remains in that garage, two things happened simultaneously. A murder warrant was issued for Stephen Grant, and every law enforcement agency in Michigan began looking for him. Stephen had borrowed a pickup truck from a friend and driven away while detectives were still inside his house, executing the search warrant. He had watched them pull up. He had seen what was coming. And rather than face what he had done, he ran. He drove north, far north, away from Washington Township, away from Detroit, away from the life he had destroyed. He stopped at his sister's house and took something with him: liquor and prescription pills. He later told investigators he was planning to kill himself in the wilderness. He drove 225 miles to Wilderness State Park, a remote, frozen stretch of forest at the very tip of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. He parked the truck. He walked into the woods. He lay down under a fallen tree in 14-degree weather, wearing nothing but a shirt, slacks, and socks. He was not brave enough to live with what he had done. But as it turned out, he was not committed enough to die for it either. Back in Macomb County, investigators were working fast. They tracked Stephen's cell phone. He made a call to his sister, and that single call gave away his location. Police converged on Wilderness State Park. They found the abandoned pickup truck. A helicopter crew followed his footprints through the snow. Ground searchers closed in. On March 4th, 2007, just 2 days after Tara's torso was discovered, Stephen Grant was found huddled under that tree, hypothermic, barely conscious, soaked in alcohol and pills. He was airlifted to Northern Michigan Hospital in Petoskey. Doctors stabilized him. He was handcuffed to a hospital bed. And then he started talking. Stephen Grant gave a full, detailed, recorded confession from his hospital bed. He described the argument on February 9th. He described strangling Tara. He described taking her body to his father's machine shop. He described everything in a calm, matter-of-fact tone that investigators said was deeply unsettling. The confession ran for 3 hours. Every word of it was recorded. Every word of it would eventually be played for a jury. Meanwhile, the rest of Tara's remains were recovered from Stony Creek Metro Park, the same public park where families had continued walking and playing while pieces of her lay hidden in the snow. The community was horrified. Hundreds of people gathered at that park in the days that followed for a candlelight vigil in her honor. The case went to trial in December 2007. The courtroom in Mount Clemens, Michigan, was packed every single day. Prosecutor Eric Smith built a straightforward but devastating case. The 3-hour recorded confession was played in full. Forensic evidence from the machine shop was presented: blood, hair, tissue. The medical examiner testified that Tara had lost consciousness in 90 seconds and was dead in 4 minutes. Stephen's defense team argued the killing was not premeditated, that it happened in the heat of a sudden, explosive argument, which would make it second-degree murder rather than first-degree. It was a legal distinction that would matter enormously for sentencing. The jury deliberated. On December 21st, 2007, they returned their verdict. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Guilty of mutilation of a corpse. Tara's family sat in that courtroom and heard those words. Her sister, Alicia, who had been raising Tara's 2 children since the arrest, was present. There were tears. There was relief. There was grief that no verdict could ever fully resolve. On February 21st, 2008, almost exactly 1 year after Tara was killed, Stephen Grant stood before the judge for sentencing. He did not speak. On the advice of his attorney, he stayed silent as the judge handed down the sentence: 50 to 80 years in prison, with an additional 6 to 10 years for the mutilation conviction, to run concurrently. His earliest possible release date is the year 2057. He will be over 80 years old if he ever walks free, and every appeal he has filed since conviction has been denied. The Michigan Supreme Court upheld both the conviction and the sentence. A federal appeals court did the same. Tara's family did not celebrate. There is no celebration in a moment like that. There is only the long, quiet exhale of people who spent a year fighting for a woman who deserved so much better, and the weight of knowing that justice, however real, cannot bring her back. Outside the courthouse, the world moved on. Inside the hearts of everyone who loved Tara Grant, nothing would ever be the same. Tara was gone. but she refused to disappear. After Stephen Grant was taken to prison, 2 small children had to learn how to live in a world without their mother. Lindsay was 6 years old. Ian was just 4. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, and yet old enough to feel the shape of the hole that had been left behind. Tara's sister, Alicia Standifer, took them in. She and her husband opened their home and their hearts and raised Lindsay and Ian as their own. It was not easy. Alicia was a young woman herself, suddenly responsible for 4 children instead of 2, carrying her own grief while trying to protect the grief of others. She has since called the experience the hardest and most important thing she has ever done. Both children eventually took the Standifer name. They left Michigan, moved to Ohio, and later to Wisconsin, building new lives in new places, away from the headlines and the tragedy that had defined their earliest years. But they never forgot their mother. In 2007, a community walk was organized in Tara's honor in Macomb County. It was called Tara's Walk. What started as a small local tribute grew into something much larger, an annual 5K event that raises money and awareness for domestic violence victims across Michigan. The proceeds go to the Tara Liberation Fund, which provides emergency financial help to survivors of domestic abuse who are trying to escape dangerous situations. By the 10th anniversary in 2017, more than 500 people were registered to walk. And standing at that event, speaking to the crowd, were Lindsay and Ian, now teenagers, now strong, now choosing to turn their pain into purpose. Lindsay, then 16, stood at the microphone and said that her mother would not have wanted her death to mean nothing. She said her mother would have wanted people to understand that these situations happen and that it takes awareness, courage, and community to stop them. Ian, then 14, said that even if you are not directly affected by domestic violence, you can still help someone who is. These are Tara's children. This is her legacy speaking. Alicia has been equally powerful in her honesty. She has publicly admitted that she saw controlling behavior from Stephen for years and said nothing, assuming Tara could handle it, believing it was not her place to intervene. She has called that the worst mistake of her life. She now speaks openly about it because she knows that silence is exactly what allows abusers to operate. Tara's case, she says, is a reminder that domestic violence does not only happen in poor households or broken families. It happens in clean suburban homes with good schools and 2-car garages. It happens behind smiling family photos. It happens to women who are strong, successful, and completely capable, because abusers do not target weakness. They target proximity. As for Stephen Grant, he remains behind bars. He is currently held at Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee County, Michigan. Every appeal he has filed has been denied. His earliest release date is 2057. His own father, unable to recover from the destruction his son caused, died by suicide in June 2008, just months after the sentencing. The Grant family, as it existed, is gone. The case changed how Michigan media and law enforcement communicate with the public during missing persons investigations. The Macomb County Sheriff's Department committed to daily press conferences throughout the search, a level of public transparency that kept the community informed and ultimately helped generate the tips and attention that broke the case open. 2 books have been written about Tara's murder. Dateline NBC covered the case in a full episode. Larry King Live, Court TV. Her story reached millions of people, not because it was sensational, but because it was familiar. Because people looked at Tara's life and saw someone they recognized. A working mother, a driven woman, someone who left notes for her children before every business trip because she wanted them to know they were loved even when she was far away. That is who Tara Grant was. Not a headline, not a case number, not a statistic in a domestic violence report. She was a girl from Delta County, Michigan, who played clarinet in the school band and won awards for 4-H and dreamed big enough to build a real career from nothing. She was a woman who loved art so much that the man who would one day kill her proposed to her on the steps of a museum. She was a mother who made sure her children felt her love even from across the country. She deserved more time. She deserved to see Lindsay swim and run track. She deserved to watch Ian wrestle and play football. She deserved to grow old and tell stories and laugh too loud and talk too much the way she always had. Since the very first day she said hello to a stranger as an infant and never really stopped. The world is less warm without her in it. Her name was Tara Lynn Grant. She was 34 years old. And she deserved so much more.